So the Epic Love Show is here to share inspiring stories of love through action. And Ricky is definitely one of those stories we're very excited to host. And the show is brought to you by the Piper's Angels Foundation for Cystic Fibrosis. You can listen to this show on playback on iHeartRadio, Spotify, or Pandora. And you can always watch live or share from our Facebook page or from the Epic Love Show on YouTube. We invite you to share and subscribe. And always want to share our gratitude for everybody who tunes in weekly to this show. This show is meaningful to me personally. It's meaningful to our organization in this community and everybody who is a part of the growing audience for it. And when we have the opportunity to share incredible stories like Ricky's, we always want to encourage everybody to open your hearts and minds and let's do our best to bring as much light and love to all the communities we have out there. And considering that, shows like this open it up to kind of a global audience, right? And that's the type of world and community we live in now. So we want to celebrate that love. So thank you all for tuning in if you're on Facebook or YouTube. Appreciate it. So Ricky is the founder and executive director of Inner City Innovators and has made it his life mission to inspire and empower inner city youth to embody the change so desperately needed in their communities. Ricky is a boots on the ground, all-in agent of change who believes that real change happens when the people who need it lead it. And as a child raised in the inner city of West Palm Beach, Ricky has seen firsthand the plights associated with growing up in communities of concentrated disadvantage. He has suffered from homelessness, witnessed familial addiction, lost friends to gun violence, and was expected to be another statistic. In fact, he admits to being well on his way to fulfilling that destiny until he vowed to change the trajectory of his life. Well known in West Palm Beach and beyond for his community activism, Ricky has found a way to use his life experiences and social capital to bring hope to neighborhoods and promote the value of resilience. A celebrated speaker and mentor, he has big plans for the inner city and is working hard to change the image and climate of inner city neighborhoods throughout Palm Beach County, in the country, in the world.
Yes.
Ricky, welcome back to the Epic Love Show. So happy to have you here. It's been a little over a year, I believe, since the last time we had you on the show.
Yeah.
And a lot has changed in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I imagine a lot has changed for Inner City Innovators and for you as a developing community leader and nonprofit creator and executive director. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Because
those are two different things. You can be a nonprofit executive director and founder, which are two things,
right,
and own that role. And then you could be a community leader separately.
Right.
But to be both is a lot.
You are one of the few people that gets it and appreciates it, man. Like I often feel like I'm wearing many hats. This week's been a whirlwind. When things happen and I have to represent my community, most days I'm having to represent my organization. And both of those are 40-hour per week jobs in and of themselves. So I'm not even surprised when I have weeks like this past week where I'm working 12 hours a day. So it's fun. I wouldn't trade any of it. And I'm super grateful and super excited to be here, man. So thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you're doing a fantastic job bringing, the voice of many. And I saw you on a couple different media outlets this past week. So it has been a whirlwind for you and for the world in a lot of ways, between, COVID-19 coming up and then, this tragedy with George Floyd and it just seems like there's a lot of upwelling of energy, and change.
Yeah.
And as it says in your bio, you're really leading as a change agent.
Right.
And
right.
So as all this has come up, what has it been like for you personally, and in your role and in your community and just, how you deal with day to day?
Yeah, well, it's tough. Our realm is the youth delinquency and gun violence prevention realm. So we're focused on saving the lives of the young men who call our communities home. In our Hope Dealer Mentoring Program, we have about 30 young men in our program. 40% of them have been shot before. 40% of them. So
that's a crazy statistic.
It is. And you could, like, so many more of them were witnesses to their friends' shootings, But because of our work and since our work, none of those young men have gone back. Most of them are now employed or working. And some of them are in our Hope Dealer Leadership Program, which we launched this summer, where we're taking the young men that we feel like can really help us take this movement to the next level. So we've taken 10 of these guys, and they'll be responsible for doing the work with the larger group of 30. And then those 30 will be responsible for taking the work into the community. Because everything we do as an organization is designed so that the young people that we work with can be the ones leading it sooner rather than later.
Right.
And my quote, you shared it on social media, real change happens when the people who need it lead it. So everything I'm about, it's been about empowering this next generation of leaders, not for tomorrow, but to step up and start leading today.
Yeah, and I love that quote. I mean, that really, in a way, says it all, and it speaks to to your leadership. And my business coach Peter Marcus always says, the team looks like its leader.
Yeah.
And so you're doing an incredible job on the advocacy and the platform and the network and the community that you're building. And so, with you being in the community, having a voice, having the nonprofit, but also being in this, community leadership role.
Yeah.
What has your interaction with the community looked like as a lot of these, recent, activities have really, built up?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. When I first heard about what happened with George Floyd and I saw the video, it was heartbreaking for me. It really was. I didn't know how to process it at the time. And then you see the kind of momentum that it had taken place all around the country with people really outraged at what happened. There's no way, there are no alternative angles on that video. It was 8 minutes of pain and suffering and agony, ending up in his death. And so, when I saw everything happening and everyone went angry and upset, like, I made a note to myself, or a promise to myself, probably a year ago, that because my work is so traumatic, and every day I hear about a gunshot or I'm responding to a shooting, I'm concerned that it's one of the young men that I work with, because so often that's been the case. I had to close my antenna off from things that were happening at a national level and really focus my attention on what was happening in the community. So I'll be honest, man, when it first happened, I did everything I could to just keep my head down, keep my hands on the plow and doing the work. But as you've seen, the outrage has been so much that not even I have been able to do that. I've kind of had to continue to work with the intense and laser-like focus that I have, but also address this. And one of the ways we've been able to address this with the needs of the community in mind is I was able to partner up with Rodney Mayo, entrepreneur, pretty much runs the 500 block of Clematis, a very passionate guy, but we partnered up to do what we called the Barbecue for Peace. We've seen a lot of people exploiting the peaceful protests that were going on early on, so we wanted to do something to kind of protect the energy and really give people an opportunity to voice their frustrations. We wanted to give our city leaders the platform. We wanted to give law enforcement the platform, and we wanted to engage each other and know that we could do it in a peaceful way at a local level. Because one of the things that you don't too often see or realize is that when something like this happens the way it does, and that happened in Minnesota, correct? Mm-hmm. And you see the way it spreads like a wildfire through the country, and it could erode any community progress that could have been made before that. So that's the most heartbreaking thing, is that even departments that were trying to do the right things and communities that were kind of improving those relationships, it can burn up just like this. So we really wanted to create an event that would help set the pace and the narrative, because the protests and the riots, that's just the start. That's just the initial, hey, everybody, this happened. The energy is there. It's going to be all about the long-term things that are going to be necessary to make sure that what happened to Mr. Floyd doesn't happen to anyone here in our own backyard.
Right. And so what did that event look like as you brought it together? in the community?
Well, I got to take my hat off to Rodney Mayo. You know, we were supposed to have it on the 500 block of Clematis, but it wasn't approved, so we had to move it the night before to Lake Worth. And the city of Lake Worth was wonderful in accepting the event and helping everything run as smoothly as possible. So that first and foremost, I want to commend him because I don't know how he pulled it off. But man, when we showed up, all these people were just there and besides the crowd and all the love that was there, the part that stood out to me the most was I'm on stage and I'm giving my speech, and my young men are standing shoulder to shoulder with me. And I had this one young man, Earl Buchanan, he's probably watching, and he wants to be a hip hop artist, and he was given such short notice, like, hey, if you want to go up and do this, here's the opportunity.
Right.
So right after I give my speech, really trying to inspire and uplift the crowd for the work that needs to be done going forward, Earl comes on to perform right after me. And while he's performing, it was powerful. He did it to the instrumental of Tupac's Changes. And it was just so uplifting, so what we needed to hear. But the young men that were with me, one of the young men started crying because of the moment.
Right.
His buddy, his friend who was shot and nearly lost his life is here on stage performing. We're in this movement and we're leading change. We're not talking about change. We didn't just rise up when this stuff started happening around the country, but we've been consistently working to breathe the change that we needed in our communities. And for the first time, it hit it. And once I saw him crying, I saw my coworker Norman crying. I started crying. People in the crowd were crying. But it was such a powerful moment because it was a brief window into the soul of the future of this movement, man, where these young people are finally getting the role that they play in this process.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you created that vehicle and that channel and that venue to empower that.
Yeah.
And that's really amazing. And I appreciate that the way you share it, because it speaks to your intellectual capacity to bring in the different perspectives. How the police departments, how they're having to adjust, and like you said, the trust that's being built in the community, and then how quickly it can be eroded. And there is so much work to do. And
Absolutely.
As they say, don't talk about it, be about it.
Right. And
you're definitely being about it. And what a beautiful moment and experience to have with everybody there to catalyze.
Yes.
And I guarantee for all those young men on stage with you, that was that moment where it resonated on a level where for the rest of their life, no matter what they do from this point forward, they knew they were standing in the right place at the right time for the right reason.
Yes, man. That's such a humbling thing to think that that's what it's become, man. And it's like, I'm telling you, bro, like, my story, man. You know where I come from. And to see that take place, man, it's amazing, man. And you're right, man. I never want to be the kind of leader that's knee-jerk, and I want to be someone that's thinking from all levels, because that's what a leader has to do. I could capitalize on people's emotion and hoorah, hoorah, but I never want to be the type to do that. And like I say all the time, I never want to be the guy that leads hundreds of thousands of people. I want to be the guy that helps empower thousands of leaders, people that stepped up into the role, so that I don't have to be as much to so many. So, yeah.
It's awesome. Well, and as for those people who are listening and watching and maybe are not familiar with you in your story, which is pretty amazing. And how old are you, Ricky?
32.
32. Yeah. Amazing. 32 years old and bringing this kind of energy into the world. I'm 36, and we both grew up here in West Palm Beach. And we both grew up in very different environments.
Yeah.
And we talked about this before the show, and I wanted everybody out there who's listening and watching, to really understand, like, it gets me emotional because when I first met Ricky, it was like, I feel like I'm looking at my twin brother. Yeah. Like the energy that you have, the few times we've gotten to share together, it's like, it's a connection I have with very few people who, I think because we share similar roles and similar visions, and we've worked in our lives to help bring change And so, you know, that connection with you, I always say, it's like, I feel like you're a brother of the universe, you know?
Absolutely.
And so,
Likewise.
you know, where I grew up in West Palm Beach, I grew up in rural West Palm Beach on dirt roads and in a very different environment. And it's interesting how, you know, the inner city where you grew up in West Palm Beach, how our kind of worlds merged and collided. And, you know, I've got to be honest with everybody out there. And, you know, there's, I've shared this with a lot of friends and family, and it's no secret. But the world that I grew up in as a kid was racially biased. I mean, you could say racist, racially biased, however you want to title it or label it. But, you know, I grew up in a very white environment. You know, the schools I was in, there was like maybe one, you know, black kid in the whole school.
Yeah.
Right. And then as I grew up, I ended up going to Palm Beach Lakes High School. And so it was like a total cultural reversal because it's a predominantly black school. And I was, you know, really the only white kid. And and it was a drastic change. And so for me, when I was a kid growing up, you know, it was common in that environment to see Confederate flags and to hear racist jokes. And I was a part of that, you know, and I even bought into it. And I remember being a kid and feeling like, you know, feeling that it wasn't right, but it was what was normal.
Right.
And even when I went to Palm Beach Lakes, I started to see the world in a whole different way in this perspective. And I mean, I was in that narrative of like, you know, I grew up with, you know, a lot of people who they had this kind of like, you got to fight for your right to be white because things are changing, right? And they want to hold. There's a holding on to the past.
Yeah.
And it was like, what am I doing? Am I holding on to the past? Am I moving into the future? I was having this identity crisis because I thought that was a part of who I was.
Right.
And when I went to Palm Beach Lakes, you know, I was on the football team there, and we worked our butts off on that football field. I had Coach Co was my coach. He was African American. The principal of the school, Principal Collins, was an amazing leader in the community, and it just started to shift everything for me. And I remember, and this is the point where I realized this is really wrong, was there was something wrong with me, that it was a problem that I had.
Yeah.
Was there was a really cute girl that at Lakes that I was so head over heels for.
Yeah.
And we had this charisma and this magic, and I'm a young man.
Yeah.
And I mean, she was super attractive, and we just had this magic. And one day she asked me, because we were always flirting and in the hallway and everything.
Right.
And one day she asked me, hey Travis, like why don't we go out on a date or something, And I mean, I just got flushed, and I had to be honest, and it was such a uncourageous thing at this point in my life for somebody who was really, I prided myself on being daring and courageous. And I had to tell her, I don't think my family and where I come from, I don't think this is going to be acceptable, and I don't know how to address that.
Yeah.
And I'm not there yet. I'm not mature enough to handle that.
Yeah.
And I look back at that, and it was heartbreaking because I could see it in her eyes. Here, somebody really at that kind of young love stage,
right.
I could see it in her eyes. We had that connection. This was a human connection.
Right.
It had nothing to do with anything else. And yet here I am. I'm defining my life and our relationship by some idea, some concept in my brain that has nothing to do with the reality of the situation.
Right.
And man, it was a. And so that's where, I've shifted through. And this is a lot of the inner city youth that you're addressing went to Palm Beach Lakes High School.
Right.
And I met some of those guys who had been shot at, or like I'd given them rides home after football practice. And I remember the couple of times I did that, being like, oh man, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I was scared, being in that neighborhood. And I was like, wow, I'm dropping them off at their grandma's house. not their parents' house,
Right.
and I don't know where I'm at. It was a total fear-based situation,
Yeah.
and a major learning lesson on multiple levels.
Yeah.
You know, personally, spiritually,
Yeah.
for growing in my life, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful for that contrast,
Yeah.
because now, you know, those old belief structures and thought patterns, although the residue sometimes appears naturally,
Right.
it's still, these things are there. It's not who I am.
Right.
And I know that, you know, you had in a sense a different but similar story.
Absolutely. I can totally relate to that, man. Growing up for me, this was one of the things that kind of helped me think through race. It was a negative kind of experience, but it helped me kind of process race relations kind of going forward. I remember when I was younger, I probably was around, I want to say 8, between the ages of 8 and 10. There was this white guy from this ministry that wanted to mentor me, you know, and he came, I met him, they were giving away bikes or something, and he came home to introduce himself to my grandma. And I just remember my grandma not approving. And she sat me down and she said, I don't want you around that white man no more. And as I would grow, I'd be in these different circumstances or situations where, you know, I got in trouble at school or something, and my grandma would sit me down and she said, I don't want you don't trust them crackers. That's the language she used. When you got to lie to them, you look them right in your eyes. If you ever got to get yourself out of the situation. So she did not trust white people. She didn't. And she put that in me. And she had her reasons, man. When I think about the world that my grandmother came up in, you know, we're talking the 60s to 70s, when the racial tension in our country was at its height. You know what I'm saying? So I couldn't imagine the things that she had to endure and that she lived through that turned her sour in that way. And so here I am, a kid, not knowing anything about the world. And this is what often happens, especially in communities like mine, where our parents or our grandparents or our guardians are passing down to us the lenses that they needed to use to survive the world.
Right.
So she wasn't giving it to me necessarily or primarily because she hated white people. She wasn't giving it to me because of any other reason than she loved me and she wanted me to be safe in this world.
Survival.
Right. And one of the biggest things that caused her harm was the person of the opposite race. And I remember that baffled me. So growing up, I always kind of had that tucked in the back of my head. You know, even though all of my teachers who I knew loved me and would do anything for me were white, I kind of always had that in my head. And it wasn't until I got older, I think I probably was a teen. I was probably around 15, 16, 17. And it's kind of where my life was in it was just at this crossroad, you know? And I remember being at this organization. The organization was called Urban Youth Impact. And I remember the people there, they became closer to me than my family at that point in time. And they were predominantly white, you know, and the time we spent together was spent outside of my community. Like, these people would literally give me the shirt off their back, you know. And it was through a prolonged exposure to these people that I began to question those early ideologies that I was given. Mm-hmm. You know, you begin to ask the question, man, like, maybe my grandma was wrong.
Yeah.
And not only that, the more profound thing it did was, if my grandmother gave me that knowledge for my survival at that age, and it kind of conditioned me, could that happen on the other end of the spectrum?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Where a white kid growing up in a situation just like you described, son, it's like our country's being taken from us by these people, and it kind of creates a image in your head of people that's unloving. And I call these disempowering models of reality. They don't empower us to become our best selves. And I honestly believe racism to be a mental illness.
Yeah.
So when someone tells, or I perceive someone as racist, I don't get any more upset or angry or emotionally charged at them as I would a kid that I knew had a mental disability. And it takes the power right away from them. And I think that's where we got to realize that the same way I was conditioned, other people can be conditioned. And what always helped, what I heard you in your story that said that kind of helped remove those barriers were exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe ignorance thrives in isolation. When people are separated and we're in our own little enclaves and we're in our echo chambers and we're dealing with these lies, that's how ignorance thrives. But I can't walk into an area, like we talk about white supremacy all the time. Like my exposure to white, if anything, being funny, I'm more supreme. You know what I'm saying? So it disrupts all the lies that you think growing up. It's like we're the same. I have the same resources, mentally, emotionally, physically as this guy, and it kind of removes the clouds, both positive and negative, especially negative, but the lies that we believed about one another. But I believe that exposure, man, is definitely the way forward.
Yeah, and that's a valuable lesson. And I my daughter's 12 years old, and she was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was 4, which is what got me into advocacy for that community and into this role. And I talk about it all the time, that you have to be intentional about your exposure, especially with kids. You want to expose them to as many things as possible, because that is what Aldous Huxley said. We have a reducer valve in our mind.
Right.
And when you're exposed to more, you open that reducer valve up, so your mind opens up.
Right.
And if your mind's opening up, it allows for your heart to open up too. And I'm an emotional being, and I've learned over the years, just like when it comes, you gotta be present with it.
Yeah.
But you gotta just let it roll. And I think crying and tears are really one of the most beautiful expressions of human being. Yeah. And I think we have a prejudice for crying. But hey,
right.
you tell kids you got to be tough. You can't cry. And really, if I'm sharing that emotion with somebody, that is, it should be an honor for the other person to be there. And if you're comfortable, if you're present with that person, you realize how special that is.
Right.
And there's really nothing that you need to do except just be with them in that emotional moment.
Yeah.
And you see that moment you talked about on stage and sharing in that. Yeah. I've seen that moment with some of our families, in the hospital, and had some of those moments myself. And when I watched the George Floyd video, so much came up for me. I felt so sorry. Sorry for ever feeling the way I felt as a kid or as a teenager, and having any thoughts that were prejudiced or racist, and also like hearing him say, "I can't breathe," I can't breathe. One of the most hard-hitting moments I've ever experienced in my life is when my daughter Piper was in the hospital, and cystic fibrosis is a lung disease primarily. Yeah. And she woke up in the middle of the night. I was sleeping in the room next to her in the hospital. She had been hospitalized for weeks, and she sat up. She said, "Daddy, my lungs are burning." And in the CF community, over their lifetime, that's what's happening, is they get these recurring lung infections, so they lose their ability to breathe. So breathing it has really resonated me since she was diagnosed. And my oldest half sister has cystic fibrosis and has had half a lung removed. So breathing is something our slogan for Piper's Angels is inspire every breath. And so to hear him say that, and to have, and I didn't want to watch it the whole thing through. I wanted to turn it off because I could see where it was going. And I was like, Travis, you gotta really take this in right now and understand what's going on in the world. Yeah. And man, that was really hard. And so I just can't imagine for everybody out there who, to even be in those shoes.
Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine earlier today where, he was a white guy, and I had met his daughter, and he was telling me his daughter, I think she's about 8 or something like that, young. And they were watching a space shuttle launch, and they flipped to the protests, and they showed the video. And it was his son, and his son was like, "Dad, why are they doing that? Why did they kill the man? I thought the police was supposed to help people." Mm-hmm. And his dad was able to help him process that event. Well, yeah, but there are bad people and things like that. Hopefully his son coming out with a perspective that the cops are there to serve and protect us.
Right.
But if you could imagine, the same way I was conditioned to race, we're also conditioned to law enforcement, where the only images that people in my community are getting in regards to law enforcement is the murders of unarmed black men.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, man, like it does something to the psyche. Like the same way I would look at white people. And the thing about it, getting pulled over for me was like a double whammy during that time. Because not only was I getting pulled over by a white person, I was getting pulled over by a cop.
Yeah.
So you could imagine the fear and the tension inside of me. It wasn't this officer's just doing this job here to keep everyone safe. This officer could potentially walk away with my life and there'd be no one here to fight for me. Right. You know? So that's one of those things, man, where we have to do more because I believe exposure removes the fear. You know, I think about what it must take to become a law officer, right? And I know it's a few months of training or whatnot, but think about if you were out of school, predominantly white school, and all your friends were white. It's homophily. We all want to be around people that are most like us. You know, it's social science 101. All right. So these cops are in schools before they become cops. They're around people who are like them, and pretty often the only time or thing they hear or learn about the black person is entertainment, the news, or something like that. So they get this job and they're thrown into some of the harshest environments, and they can't deal with it. They can't handle it, and I really believe they're fearful. But fear, in my opinion, is never a good enough reason to take a life at any level, man. So I think we have to do more to make sure that our officers aren't deathly afraid of people that they're going to encounter on the job, you know, and that's the same view I have with race. You know, the only way that, like, I never met a racist child, you know what I'm saying? I've seen many racist adults.
Right.
I believe kids are like blank pieces of paper when they enter this world. Somebody's doing the programming. And I think that's where we got to do a better job and be more intentional and more. I don't have kids, but man, when I do, like you said, you know, it's one of those things you have to be intentional. You have to be proactive about, or you end up subconsciously giving your child bad program. And that's how our world got where it is today.
Yeah,
bad program.
100%. And what's crazy is that programming based in fear, you know, and this is the Epic Love show, you know, that fear, it's illusory. It's an illusion. And those ideas, one of my favorite philosophers is Alan Watts. He called it spiritual window cleaning. No matter what your spiritual beliefs are, the idea behind it was, well, take a kid and say, okay, you know, here's a window, right? And you're looking outside and, you know, paint an image of the sun on the window. And you go up and you paint the window. Now you have this, you know, image of the sun on the window. Well, it blocks the actual sun from shining in. So when you remove the image from the window, the reality of the situation is what's there.
Right.
And that's what, you know, in our world, I think a lot of the narrative that is not talked about is exactly what you're saying. And I've seen a few people out there, some social influencers like Aubrey Marcus mention it. You know, and I've got some notes here, you know, from what Aubrey was posting, and I love some of what he was saying, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it. But, you know, he said, you know, Black lives more than matter. They're sacred.
Right.
We're sacred beings of whatever belief you want to believe in, the universe, God, whatever you want to label it or call it. But, you know, the colors and the labels, none of that is relevant to what's inside. And I love that he positioned it that way. And he said the absence of love that brought us here is the love that will get us out.
Right.
And, you know, I just, you know, he mentioned, you know, equality is not a dream, but rather a universal understanding.
Right.
And I think that's where we're going, right? That's where the society has to understand that the root cause of what's going on, the changes that you and I have been through, that exposure is self-awareness.
Right.
And so, you know, being more self-aware is a path in life that you can choose to walk as you learn and as you grow. And you have to face that fear and be okay with letting go of that old world, letting go of those old ideas, and walking into that. And if your self-awareness grows, you know, your consciousness expands and you're open to more.
Right. Absolutely. And it's the same things if you want to be successful in business. You know, you got to let go old paradigms. You got to take risks. You got to really put yourself out there. You got to be willing to learn. You got to have that same attitude with race relations, you know, or you may thrive in business, but you won't excel in those relationships that really enrich our lives. I live a full life because of the fullness and the richness of the relationships in it. Right. I got white women I call mom. I got black women I call mom. I got white men I consider father figures. I got black men I consider father figures. So I've been so blessed to have these relationships, and they've all made me better. I can step into any room of any culture, and I'm better for it because I have those relationships. And to not move on from the thing we've seen that you were speaking of, I think a lot of people are getting that. Because when I look at the most powerful thing about the protests that we've been seeing all around the country, I think the glue that's really began to make it stick is white people are frustrated. White people are beginning to validate what we've been saying all along. And it's sad that has to be the final thing that gets everyone's attention, but it is, man. Right. And I think that like young people are seeing their parents stand up to. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, where you got older people, middle-aged people, young people, all people are saying enough is enough. It's time to move forward. Because I couldn't imagine if I was a white person and every time I'm looking at the news, it's racism this and racism that. Like, when will we get past that? And if you are really wanting to get past that, like I always say, real change happens when the people who need it lead it. If we really want to get past that, then we have to see more of what we're seeing now. It's time to drop the fear of losing our position in society and focus on creating a more peaceful, a more equitable, and a more promising society for everyone, not just us. And that's a scary thing, you know, but that's why we gotta die. Ego death is needed. Right. You know, we gotta die to ourselves, you know. And every spiritual text that I respect teaches that, you know. When I'm focused and I'm consumed with myself, I'm hurting those around me. But when I drop back and I focus on how can I help my fellow, that's what I built my life on. My life has been made rich because I've chosen to go back and bless people, be a blessing to people that wouldn't have direction otherwise. And I'm rich for it, not materially, but spiritually. Right. And I think that's the attitude we gotta have, man. We gotta have hope, and we gotta embody it, because that's the only way that we take our world where we know it belongs to be. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the hope dealers, I love that you call it what it is, you know, and it's Barbara Marx Hubbard said, crisis always precedes transformation. It's like, it's, you know, a simple example, you know, but the caterpillar that goes into the metamorphosis of the chrysalis of the and then turns into the butterfly, right. That caterpillar's got to go through quite a change and die, like you said. I mean, and what's wild is that science has shown that there's, you know, these they call them imaginal cells, right. And they already have the knowledge built into them that they're going to change into something else. And you know, there's, you know, we're you could say, and people, there's some texts out there that would say that scientifically, as we are going through this awakening altogether, that we're shifting from that old survival mode of just the Homo sapien into almost this new, you know, Homo universalis, right? Like this new universal human that is aware of its own participation in the conscious evolution of ourselves, knowing that we have an influence on our culture, an influence on technology, and all of that has an influence on the environment. Absolutely. That we're an environment organism relationship too, that, you know, while we're busy still trying to fix or rid ourselves of these old paradigms, you know, the Mother Nature is suffering as well. Right. And we are each one of us individually are a small part of Mother Nature. Right. So we should start to collectively, hopefully, bring that vision together, because we're going to have much bigger challenges as a global society if things start to collapse. And
And I think that is the opportunity that may be being presented right now. We saw with COVID kind of this global united effort, but I think you're right. I think people are tired of letting these old belief systems and ideas dominate. And in a way, technology like this show, social media, everybody out there on Facebook, YouTube, this sharing is caring, as they say. And what you talked about is such a beautiful vision for this country, for our local communities, for the world. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because we talked about it on the phone before the show about how, you and I have built our organizations with a vision for something. Sometimes you don't know what that is, but like you said, as an entrepreneur, you go out and you risk it.
Right.
You're just taking the risk.
Yep.
You don't know, you're just going to jump and the parachute's going to open, right? Or you're going to be guided. Vision for people, they talk about, Olympic athletes, their coaches say, you got to visualize crossing the finish line, right? You got to visualize. And I think it sounds like a fun exercise for people. Hey, we do vision boards.
Right.
But I mean, somebody might do a vision board and then they put it in the closet or whatever. But what does it really mean to hold a vision? Right. Like you were saying when we started out the show, here's all the rest of the world. Yeah. You're living this mission every day.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, things, the voice gets louder, the polarization is pulling at both ends, and you're here grounded in the middle of it, holding this vision. And what does that feel like to you? And how do you think people can help hold the vision together?
Yeah, I think for me, what many people don't know is long before Inner City Innovators was founded, I would sit and write out a personal mission statement, what I wanted to be to the world. And my mission statement for my organization is a variation of my mission statement for myself, to inspire and empower inner city youth and residents to embody the change they want to see in their communities. And I think for me, what it means to hold the vision, because I feel like that's the only thing that could get people out of the monotony of everyday life. You have to have a vision of something greater. And it's a lack of that vision that drop. Like when I look at the one determining factor of why my young men are producing the outcomes positively that they have been lately, is because we've given them a vision to look towards you. When you're an inner city kid growing up in a single parent home, you haven't seen your dad in ages, you don't know where the next meal's coming from, the lights or water are off, you hear gunshots every night, you just lost a friend the other day. You're just in this jambalaya of chaos, and there is no common thread of purpose. So our young men realize that they're a part of the solution. It's one thing to look at a problem and lose hope. It's an entirely different thing to look at that problem and say, I'm going to determine a solution. And I think that's what holding the vision is. It's looking at our world, and our world presents us with so many opportunities to be great. There was a quote, I forgot who said it, but if anyone wants to be great, find a way to serve. You want to be great? Serve. And you look at, when I see problems, I don't see problems. I don't see something to be negative about. I see a bunch of opportunities for people to find purpose, to make our world what we want it to be. Because when you really think about it, I didn't choose to be born into the family I was born into. I didn't choose the skin that I'd be born and all the problems that come with it. I didn't choose any of it. It was what happened. And I had to take the cards I was dealt and make the best hand possible. And we all have to do that. At the end of the day, we all want the same things. And once you realize that, and you're able to take that realization into consideration and cast a vision that the lowest common denominator could get behind, then you have a vision worth holding, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's powerful. That was beautifully said, Ricky. And
thank you.
That vision that you create, and I want everybody out there, to listen to this, really embody it themselves and hold this. You've got some great comments from people out there. Ricky is an amazing imaginal cell in our world.
Jesus said it. Thank you.
Yeah. We've got some great, thank you everybody for all the comments. That vision and I want everybody to take this away from this show is two things. One, you and I have changed ourselves, and we've helped change our communities. And it took effort and work, and it took a growth in self-awareness to get to this point. And here we are. This is what's amazing to me. Is like, from the inner city streets and the dirt roads of the acreage to like where we are today and what we're doing. It's just amazing to me. And so the change, and in that vision that you just beautifully painted, the vision we all hold together for a world that serves justice, for acts that need to be have answers to, that can bring love and education to cure a disease of hatred. Right? It's a disease of the mind. That vision, when you hold it, the challenge is the discernment. It's not like we started the show, it's a perfect example. Not letting these outside things distract you from holding the vision, because you can see the vision in your mind's eye. And if you can hold that in your mind's eye and nothing can distract you from it, it will happen. And you are just the living, breathing example of it, and it's amazing. And I want to invite everybody out there to make sure that you check out Inner City Innovators. You follow Ricky, his amazing journey, his hero's journey and path, which is, love can be the simple thing of holding the door, and love can be small and it can be big. And epic love is really about the hero's journey. And every one of the young men you represent, the community that you represent, they're on their own hero's journey, and you're helping lead that and open that door for them. So I'm so honored and grateful that you took the time. I know you have a really busy schedule to come on the show and continue to share what you're doing. We got a couple minutes left. Do you have any final thoughts or words for the audience?
Absolutely, man. I know in times like this, a lot of my white friends are asking, how can we be better allies? How can we be better supporters? And I know it's tough. Everybody wants to do something, but I always say the key to anything, the foundation to any human interaction is relationship. I say be a friend. Get to know someone. Sit down with a friend that is probably suffering, especially someone from the Black community. And just get to know them, create that safe place where you can have your questions answered and you can divert your energy in the best way possible. But I think this is a time, man, where our country needs hope dealers more than ever. We've seen the vitriol, we've seen the negativity, we've seen the division, and where does it get us? It's time for the hope dealers to arise. It's time for us to cast a vision greater than ourselves. It's time for us to link arms. And it's time for us to do everything we can to make sure that we leave this world in a better condition than that which we found it.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for bringing me this shirt today. I'm going to represent it in a rocket. And you are the hope. You are such an embodiment of that vision and that mission that you had. And what Epic Love as a show represents, and the mission that we hope to cultivate with this show. And I can't wait for you to come back on next time. Hopefully we'll have more positive change to talk about. We'll have a lot of constructive stuff to see, how we're progressing in this community and beyond. And I'm really honored and grateful to know you as a brother and to be working towards a better world and community together.
Thank you for everything you do for me, brother. I appreciate you and this opportunity to speak to these people.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll see you next week in the Epic Love Show, 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. Keep promoting the positive. Share this on Instagram, on social media, and let's keep it rocking. Thank you.
Nice. That was awesome, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Inspire me.
Oh, man. No, you get me fired up.
I feel like I'm not in my body, so I'm talking, but it's not me that's talking. And I'm sitting there surprised by what's coming out of my mouth.
You said some really powerful stuff.
I like the thing you said about, the different age groups and stuff. Because funny enough, my daughter recently messaged me and she's like, man, I'm so glad to see you're not one of those old white men because I was sharing a bunch of stuff. Because, and her mom is a racist.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
I have 2 grandchildren that are half black, half white.
Yeah.
So it blows my mind that their